All right. Good morning, everybody. If you can just let me know if you can hear me okay. All right. Thank you all. As always, nice to be with you. We will go ahead and join palms as we get started. And you can repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'll be leading you all in your intro to Buddhism and meditation this morning. I always like to start out with a question just to give people time to join in before we start meditation, and also just time for you all to communicate with each other a little bit. So I think my question is, let's see, how can I phrase this? When you face a, let's say, challenging conversation or difficult moment, or say a frustrating phone call, for example, how well are you able to leave that and come back to present moment? Are you able to just see things for how they were at that moment and then come back to being here? So I think maybe a simple way to word that is, how quickly are you able to move on from difficult or challenging situations? If you're new to joining us, there's a chat box there on your screen. Feel free to just type in your response, as short or as lengthy as you would like. All right. How quickly are you able to move on from challenging moments and be present? How quickly are you able to move on from challenging moments and be present? So there's my question. I'm going to step away for 1 minute and give you all some time just to, again, chime in your response when you get off a difficult phone call, or maybe have a conversation with someone, or frustrated with work or school, whatever it might be. How quickly are you able to just set that down and come back to the present moment? So I'll give you a moment just to chime in, and I will be right back. All right. I see you've all wasted no time in responding to this one. All right. And not great, but working on it. And good morning back to you, Katie. Thanks for joining us. But getting a little better. Bridget, this is a huge challenge for me. I oftentimes internalize and am unable to let go until circumstances change and or I've had the chance to vent to someone. Marisa, depends on the day. Sometimes I can stay present throughout the moment, and sometimes I don't recover for a day or more. Bill, I'm much better able to move on from challenging moments and to be present now with a few years of meditation practice than I had been in the past before it. Still need to keep practicing. Yep, for sure. Part of this is fear of communicating my needs, which I'm getting better at. Justin has much to do with mindset going into the challenging moment. Starting at peace comes with quicker recovery. Starting stressed makes it stick longer. Yep, definitely. Amy, depends on the challenge. Sometimes it takes me 2+ days if it's a big issue that I need to reflect on, for sure. Kelly, I'm still in the space where I'm becoming aware of the trigger and my reaction. It's getting easier the more I practice to lengthen the pause between trigger and reaction, for sure. Lisa, I find that to be one of the most difficult, but noticed improvement thinking of a few years ago versus today. This practice helps. Yeah, good responses. All very, very obviously real to your own experience. I'm laughing because the reason I bring this up is so I jumped on what I thought would be a quick call at 9:45 just to get something done. And at 10:59, so about 1 minute before I logged on here was when I hung up. So I spent an hour and 15 minutes on the phone with customer service trying to work through an issue that someone else had, let's just say, not done properly on something. So I just spent an hour and 15 minutes dealing with just stuff. And what's interesting to me is, so, then I walked in here and I sit down and, it's 10:55 and I'm trying to wrap up, and 10:59, I'm like, okay, this is done. And then I click go. And here we are. So that's what led me to ask this question. And for me, and a few of you referenced this, that it is a matter of practice, because whatever that call may or may not have been, or how it worked or didn't work, or whether it went through I wanted it to or didn't want it to, it doesn't matter. It's done. And it was, for me, and this happens a lot of you have seen me for years at Temple, where, it'll be chaos for like 3 hours in that morning at Temple. And then 11 o'clock hits and we sit down, and then it's time to go. So I think it's one of the things that, for me, I've really benefited from over the years with this practice is, for me, every time you sit, every time you join palms, every time I hit the bell, it's just a reminder that, okay, I'm here. This is it. I'm sitting, I'm breathing. There's people here. They're sitting, they're breathing. And nobody really cares about what's going on elsewhere. So why bring that madness into anybody else? And obviously I'm bringing it in as an example. But the practice really has taught me over the years to just, what's done is done. And I know it's much easier said than done. And as a few of you said, some days you're better at it than others, and you see yourself improving, and that's really great. But often we tend to dwell on things way too long, and tend to play things in scenarios in our head way too long, and tell ourselves stories over and over about things that have happened. And then we relive that pain over and over and over again. And so I've found it to be a great practice, using meditation to as a tool to learn to stay present, to just say, here I am. And that's it. So I see one more here, Benton. Depends on who that person is, customer rep or someone you have a complex relationship with, and what was discussed. Sometimes it's hard, and it depends on whether there was a resolution of issue. Yeah, sure. And a few of you referenced this also, that obviously sometimes conversations need follow-up. And just because the conversation is done doesn't mean the issue or situation is done. The hour and 15 minutes I just spent with my situation is definitely not done, and we'll have to resume later. But that later is not now. So for me, just using myself as an example, the practice as we begin to do the meditation, and I continue to share with you all and respond to comments and questions later, the practice that I'm sharing is, can I just be present, sitting, breathing, and communicating with you all, and not spend meditation time playing that conversation over and over again, or planning the future, or strategizing how the next call is going to go. That is my practice. And so that is what I will work on now, just like hopefully you will all work on just sitting and being present. So I appreciate you all sharing. It's always nice to hear from everybody. I'll go ahead and start the meditation now. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You won't figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit and we're going to breathe, okay? Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, just pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything from this practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or the chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless where we come from or what we believe in, where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen and we react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. For most of us, the way we respond to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way we feel now is closer to how we feel always. just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not easy. It's not necessarily fun, but meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. So with that, I always like to just now open up to questions. If you're new to joining us, welcome. Thanks for being here. There's a chat box on your screen. So feel free to type in any question with regards to meditation, Buddhist practice. And I'll use the rest of the time to respond to what's on your mind. Questions, thoughts, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. Let's see. Hello, Jeff and everybody. Any advice on being in a negative environment you have no control over? Because I've noticed that however much you help, you can't expect people to change. Yeah, sure. It's a good question. And there's one of my favorite expressions is it says to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. And so if you find yourself, there's a couple things here really from this practice, but if you find yourself in a negative environment, I understand that, just work with me here for a minute. We're just in environments. We're surrounded by people and places. And we then label them as negative or positive. And I get it. There are definitely environments that are negative versus positive from a, just conversation's sake. And so I understand the intention and the meaning, I think, when you say a negative environment. But I just want to throw this out there for you initially, is to understand that you're just in an environment. And so you have chosen to label and define this environment as a negative because the reasons vary. But to sum it up, the reasons that you say this environment is negative is because it's not the way you want it to be. And again, I'm not debating you right or wrong. I'm just suggesting that you recognize that the environment you call as negative is just an environment that you want to be different. And very often in these environments that we call negative, they're not negative to other people, they're just negative to us. To other people who are in them and creating them, they're totally fine. So really, Buddhist teachings around duality is to help us go beyond defining things as negative or positive and just recognize you're in an environment that you don't like and you want it to be different. So the question is to ask yourself, what don't I like about it and why do I want it to be different? And am I willing to embrace the environment that I'm in if I am in fact in a situation where I can't remove myself from it? Very often people ask about unhealthy, toxic relationships or, and of course, for those who don't know me, if you're in any sort of physical harm, physical danger, physical abuse, things like that, obviously, yes, remove yourself from these environments. These are negative environments. But that's why it's hard in a very general way to respond without knowing specifics, and I don't really want to know specifics. But understand that we are labeling these environments because we don't like what's going on. And the second part to your question, which is how much you help, you can't expect people to change. Based on the way you asked the question, and I'm just throwing this out there, you say you can't expect people to change, but it's almost like you're wanting people to change. So you're helping them, wanting them to change, and you're expecting them to change, but they're not. And therefore you're disappointed, you're frustrated, you're upset, you're sad, whatever it might be. And I get it. You know, a lot of people who say the people battling addiction, you know, and I've been around that environment, working in it for 20 plus years. I've come across a lot of family members and loved ones who see others going through addiction. They want them to change, and it's really hard on them. And we all know that we're not going to change unless we want to change. And it's the same thing with other people. So if you kind of combine this question of, you know, what you call negative environments that you have no control over and expecting others to change, it sounds a lot like you're putting it on everybody else. And if this is an environment that you are in and that you cannot get out of, then it might be a matter of you opening up your mind, your heart to recognizing that people just don't operate the way you do. And that's hard for us. You know, we've painted this pretty little picture of how we want things to be. And again, of course, if you're in harm, you're in danger, physical situations, those are completely different. But if you're just in an environment where you don't like what people talk about and you don't like the way they say things, that's a great practice for you. The world is going to be filled with people in places that don't say the things we want to hear. You know, I call this, often I talk about what I call Buddhist arrogance, and I went through it when I first started really kind of looking at studying, practicing Buddhism. Is I all of a sudden, this would have been back in 2003, 2004, 2005, you know, kind of defaulting to thinking that because I went to a Buddhist temple and I read Buddhist books and all I talked about was kindness and compassion, I then started to judge others. And I thought I was better than they were because I had my newfound Buddhist thing and we just practice love and kindness and you're all a bunch of mean, you know whats. So I also caution all of us to be aware of that a lot of the things and the environments that we might be in, we were doing those same things 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago. I was the center of tons of unhealthy environments. Everything I did around me for the most part was unhealthy. And, you know, as hard as I worked to build the Dharma Bum Temple and to, you know, hold a healthy, spiritual, beautiful community together in a totally different way, I had the same personality when I was building unhealthy environments. So just some thoughts, not necessarily answering your question, but just to begin to recognize that sometimes we just have to embrace things for the way they are and watch our mind at dealing with them. Bridget, and hopefully that's helpful. Again, I say for like the 5th time, negative environments that are abusive and unhealthy in that manner, please remove yourself from them. Bridget, what Buddhist practices would you recommend to help with determination and perseverance? You know, it's a good question. So the Buddhist practice of diligence, it's the last thing he said before he died. They were all afraid, the disciples were all afraid that, you know, the Buddha was passing and they didn't know who would continue to teach. And he said, I've taught you everything for 45 years. Be a light unto yourself and strive on with diligence, right? Diligence is in many ways the opposite of laziness. And very often, especially in times of a pandemic, you're not as motivated maybe without, we're not going places the way we used to be. Routines are totally changed. So it's really easy to fall into this kind of very lethargic, lazy way of being. And a lot of it, I think, the teaching of Zen Master Dogen, who lived, is the founder of the Soto Zen school, and he lived from 1200 to 1253. He would say, practice as if your hair is on fire, meaning diligently work at this practice as if your hair was on fire, because it is. So if your hair was on fire, you wouldn't just sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to lay on the couch and watch Netflix for 4 hours. You would aggressively run to put out that fire that's on your head. Now, we might sit around and think that, metaphorically speaking, we're not on fire because we have the comfort of our couch and our Netflix. But we're just stuck in some misery or depression or sadness or anger or whatever it might be. And we are losing ourselves in all of these distractions, all of the devices, the technology, the Zoom events, all these things we're just losing ourselves in. And for me, this practice has always been about waking up to, am I suffering? Which is yes. And why? And that's greed, anger, and ignorance. And do I want to spend the rest of my life being greedy and being angry and being ignorant? So the greed, the anger, the ignorance, that is the flame. Just because we sit on a couch and watch Netflix for 3 hours doesn't mean we've moved away from greed, anger, and ignorance. It just means we're ignoring it. Again, ignorance, ignoring. We're ignoring it by getting lost in Netflix for 3 hours. Again, your hair's on fire. You do anything you can to put it out. Now, when we are greedy and we are angry and we are ignorant, other people suffer. But for whatever reason, if our hair is on fire, we immediately put it out. If our actions cause suffering, pain to ourselves or others, we're like, well, that's okay. I'll get back to that in 3 hours because I want to watch Netflix. And that's just one example of a million things we do to just get lost. And again, I'm not putting down Netflix. I watch Netflix, right? But it's about recognizing that we are escaping from waking up to our suffering by getting lost in sense pleasures and distractions. So I think a simple response, what Buddhist practices would you recommend to help with determination and perseverance, which is diligence, is to recognize that when you're greedy, when you're angry, and when you're ignorant, you suffer and other people suffer. And I would remind yourself of that every single day and fully commit yourself to cultivating a path that allows you and others to suffer less. So hopefully that's helpful, Bridget. Bill, I saw a Zen saying today that said, in Zen, we don't find the answers, we lose the questions. I like this and the idea of making peace with not having the answers to questions. How do we get there? All right. Thank you for that, Bill. Lisa, I've noticed that on the weekend, I feel a lot of pressure to be productive, i.e. check a lot of things off a to-do list. But I've been thinking lately about how I've been labeling productive. Yeah, and I know there's not really a question in there. Maybe just some thoughts on my end that it all comes back to, for me, this idea of duality. Again, I referenced this earlier, but the Buddhist teachings on duality, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, we've created this structure, this kind of norm that says I have Monday through Friday, and then I have Saturday and Sunday. And unfortunately, we've built our way of life for most people, not everybody. I mean, there are people who love what they do 7 days a week. I'm one of them. But there are people out there who do enjoy what they do all the time. Majority of the people that I see and come across, and granted, it's a Buddhist temple and people come here because they're challenged and struggling. Majority of the people I see do not love what they do Monday through Friday, and they get to the weekend and they think, okay, now's my time to be free and do what I want. And again, there's no question to what you shared, so I'm just going to share a little brief story about maybe rephrasing how we look at the week versus the weekend, and look at them not even as days, but just moments of time. If you want to break it down to a day, that's okay too, as a practice, and just say, this is today, because that's what it is. But there's a story I'll share. This would have been in 2005. And so I was living in Taiwan, Buddhist monastery. And there was a guy, he'd come in. He was a Canadian guy, but he was living in Taiwan, and he would come visit the monastery. And he's a guy that, he's a guy that in my, previous life of someone who was going out all the time and being social, he's a guy that I would have hung out with. And our personalities just kind of clicked. So he would come visit sometimes, and we were walking through the monastery one day, and he said, do you want to go out tonight? And, there's that, like, do you want to go out tonight? That kind of phrase, that expression. And it was Friday. And I said, Friday, I said, go out. I said, I live at a monastery, we don't really go out. There's no kind of going out on a Friday night. And he said, well, what do you do to blow off steam? And I said, and it was a great dialogue, and really taught me a lot. And I've ever since then continued to share the story and reflect on it differently each time. But he said, well, what do you do to blow off steam? And I thought about it for a second. And I said, well, look where I live. My entire environment that I'm in is cultivating and practicing every moment. And there's no steam being accumulated that needs to be blown off. And it kind of just hit him a little bit. And like I said, ever since then, I've always shared the story, and I think about it all the time, or, think about it differently each time, I should say. And that, coming back to your question of, the weekends productive versus during the week, these are just moments of time. And for some reason, we save these things for weekends. And I get it. Maybe there's something that's only available on the weekends, or maybe we have to work 9 to 5 and we can't do something, so there are obviously very practical scenarios here. But I think my suggestion is that, maybe you're on the right track with reinvestigating or relooking, whatever the right way to say that is, the word productive. It's often tied to the fact that Monday through Friday we do a bunch of stuff we don't want to do, and then Saturday, Sunday we do a bunch of stuff we want to do, or we feel like we must be productive with things that we didn't get to do Monday through Friday. And I think that whole system is screwed up and just sucks. I think it sucks that majority of people spend 5 days a week their entire life being miserable just so they can have 2 days of feeling okay. So just some thoughts on that. A couple more questions here, then we'll wrap up. Justin, how do we make peace with undesired reflections of ourselves we see in other people? Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of making peace with ourselves, regardless of what the situation is, and you say, the reflection of ourselves and others, part of, I think, making peace with yourself is, it's really that word we always say and hear around Buddhism, which is compassion. Part of it is having compassion for yourself, which is always suggested to first have compassion. I don't know if any of you ever seen the prayer wheel. A lot of people know it from, what was the name of the movie? I'm drawing a blank now, the old Eddie Murphy movie. And he's up in the Himalayas, and he's turning the prayer wheel, and he's I want the knife, and he's rapping to it. But that's a prayer wheel. It's a big wheel that you turn, and the prayer of compassion is inside Om Mani Padme Hum, which literally means the jewel in the lotus. And so a beautiful, whether it's a handheld prayer wheel that you just hold and you turn it and it sends the prayer of compassion, or they have ones that are large, you can hang them on a desk or a wall. The idea behind those is that as you turn it, you send compassion to the world, but you turn it to where it sends compassion to yourself first. That's the idea, that we must have compassion, love, kindness in ourselves to be able to send that out to others. So I think the way, or a way, to make peace with ourselves is to understand that we have, as individuals, we've all done harm. We've harmed ourselves, we've harmed others. We've done some good, we've done some bad. And again, these are just words to help us communicate. Um, and to be able to understand that you're just human. So, again, using me as an example, I've done so many terrible things in my life, and I had to make peace with it. Otherwise, it would destroy me. It doesn't make the things that I did right. It doesn't mean the people I've hurt are no longer hurt just because I have peace with myself. And I constantly remind myself of all the times I've hurt others and the things I've done to others, because it allows me to deeply commit to not doing those things again. And then at the same time, understand that I must have compassion towards myself and have forgiveness towards myself. So, if you start using, again, kind of coming back to Buddhist arrogance, but if you start looking at Buddhist teachings and like putting them on a pedestal and measuring them as this like ideal person you're supposed to be, and then you start comparing who you are now to who the Buddha is teaching us to, or to being the way the Buddha is teaching us. If you compare who you are to these teachings, a lot of us are going to seemingly feel like we're failing miserably and hate ourselves. And so I caution against that. Just recognize that we are a work in progress. We are cultivating the practice of kindness and compassion and wisdom. As Suzuki Roshi said, you're all perfect exactly how you are, and you all could use a little improvement. So try not to be so hard on yourself, Justin. All right, last question here, and then we'll wrap up. I recently bought something and got frustrated that it would take some time to ship to me, and then I was disappointed at my frustration. Do you have tips on cultivating patience? Yes. I would order it again. I would expect it to be totally different. Different example, but same idea. The only way to cultivate patience is to have things happen to you that you don't like. And I know that might sound crazy, but you can't cultivate patience without being challenged. Right? So my greatest example for cultivating patience is most people I know have a family member that drives them crazy, that frustrates them, that challenges them, that irritates them, whatever it might be. Call that person and stay on the phone with them. And 5 minutes after, when you're just like pulling your hair out and you're ready to just hang up the phone, stay on with them for 5 more minutes. The only way to cultivate patience is to put ourselves in situations that require patience. So yes, you ordered something that took longer than you wanted. You didn't like your frustration. You got upset and disappointed in yourself, and that's okay. But if you want to cultivate patience, continue to put yourself in difficult situations and embrace just gratitude for the fact that we are alive and breathing, and that you could order something online, you could have it shipped, you could get it. Because it's a lot more than what other people can do. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. We opened up the Dharma Bum Temple 14 years ago to bring Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We take our unenlightened views of Buddhist teachings and we share it with those who show up. Every night, every morning, we've got something going on. We closed this next week will be a year. March 12th will have been a year since we closed due to the pandemic. Grateful for the fact that we've been able to transition just about all of our stuff online. So the website, thedharmabums.org, has our whole schedule. Classes every night, every morning, college classes, teen classes, recovery classes for those battling addiction. book study on Saturday afternoon with Pristine Mind, led by Marisa. And that's twice a month. And also the end of this month, I think the 22nd is a Monday night, we'll start a new Zen book study using a book called Zen Seeds. You can get it also at Buddha for You. Buddha for You also has been closed for a year. But as most of you know, the online store has now been up and running for a few months. So if you need anything, just go to Buddha for You. We're happy to help you there. Thanks all for being here. Please stay home. Please be safe. Please wear a mask. And let's not do anything that puts anyone at risk. So I wish you all well, and we'll see you soon.